Every organization has some kind of conversation to identify high potentials, and these can sometimes be a little controversial because they create a sense that opportunity is only for the chosen few. But there's another very real danger with high potential conversations, and that is the misidentification of high potentials, which means that you can sometimes identify somebody as a high potential and then push them too far or too fast and ultimately cause really great talent to fail. The challenge with identifying high potentials is that managers are usually asked to predict how will somebody do something in the future that you've never seen them do before. That's a very difficult question to answer, and so managers will generally fall back on having a look at their current or past performance, which is why performance is often misused to identify future potential. There are several psychometric assessments that can be used to identify a person's ability to deal with increasing cognitive complexity, but successful transitions require more than just intellectual horsepower. It's not just the smartest person who gets to the top of the pile. There's also more complex interpersonal skills and relationships and more complex self-management skills that become very challenging. So one identifier or indicator that you can use for high potential is what we refer to as career trajectory. So when it comes to career trajectory, the easiest way to explain this is to have a look at someone throwing a basketball. Now here you can see the person's throwing the basketball. If I was to ask you, can you predict where that basketball will be in the future, provided no external force acts on it? You could either do a complex physics calculation, but you would probably guess that that was about its trajectory and that the ball would go through the hoop. However, when you look at somebody throwing a basketball like that, you'd probably be fairly confident that unless somebody picked that up and dunked it in the basket, there's no way that that ball will get into that hoop. So how do we apply this concept of career trajectory to high potential identification? Well, we can break up career trajectory into 3 zones. The first is an accelerated career trajectory. That would be outside of this teal zone here. This is someone who's taking on increasingly complex levels of work very quickly. So they've spent less time in the workforce relative to other people at that same level. The second zone is a high potential zone. If someone is in this zone, they could conceivably get to the top of your organization by the time they leave the workforce. Being in either of these 2 zones doesn't automatically make someone a high potential, but the likelihood of finding a high potential outside of those 2 zones is very low because the person is just not transitioning fast enough to be considered a high potential. If someone is not in one of these 2 accelerated zones, so in this purple zone over here, then they are outside the high potential zone. Now, just like the basketball that can't go through the hoop, someone in this zone isn't moving fast enough to be a high potential. It doesn't mean that the person can't be a high performer. It doesn't mean that the person is not promotable. In fact, you'll probably find some of your best talent in this purple zone because those are your high professionals. They've had the time to acquire the experience and the knowledge to really know what it is that they're doing. But if someone is outside the zone, it doesn't mean they can't be promoted either. If you look around, you'll probably find many senior managers who have spent 30 plus years in the workforce and are absolutely promotable. So let's have a look at how we visualize this information. And you'll immediately see how we can solve some of the challenges you face while having these high potential conversations. Each dot represents a person. Yellow means I'm in a highly accelerated zone. The teal is I'm in that kind of projected high potential zone, and the purple is I'm outside of that accelerated zone. So if somebody is over here, this person will run out of organization before they run out of career. They're already at the top of the organization. There's nowhere for them to go. So this person is clearly a high retention risk because your structure can't accommodate the speed at which they're moving. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody in this zone is a high potential. Sometimes we accelerate people too quickly for other reasons, and they don't have the skills and they fail. This is why it's so important to accurately differentiate high potentials from high performers. So some of the questions you can take a look at here are, first of all, Do you have processes in place to identify high potentials? And do managers confuse performance, potential, and promotability? The next one is it a heroes or zeros type of conversation? Do you often lose people who are moving too fast for your organization? The third question, would presenting this type of visualization help managers make more accurate decisions